Action. Yeah, so I'm Michael Lee, as mentioned, and I've been working, I'm a coach and mentor for FRC 7272 Envirobots, which is the high school for environmental studies in New York City. I was also a FRC member myself back in high school in 2007, 2008 for a Las Vegas-based high school. And over the last 3 seasons, we've brought the 7272 team from its rookie year into now going into its 4th year. And I decided to do this presentation because I thought there was a lot of ways in which first teams have to build up programs and come up with different strategies to be successful in a season. And one of the logistical nightmares of the program is buying supplies, getting them shipped, getting them in time in order to complete the robot by the regional competition. And I have a lot of advice and some considerations for especially new teams where they don't know where to get supplies or what vendors or what mechanical and structural systems are out there. So I wanted to bring all that to light, and hopefully it'll be helpful for teams going forward, from rookie teams this year to teams that just had their rookie year, or even up to your 4th or 5th year of being an FRC team. So what I wanted to talk through this session is the vendors and hardware systems specifically that the 7272 team uses, but also things that I've heard other teams using, considerations for how to have an effective purchasing timeline that really spans the entire year, from starting your preseason to going right up to the regional event, and possibly afterwards based on how your regional went and what your retrospective and think back and improvements are. I also wanted to mention first choice a little bit and how you can use that program to purchase things for free based on the credits that are given to you through the first choice program, and how to balance that with purchasing things with your own team's money and grants. And then I wanted to go over some tools and supplies to consider, and also things to avoid, things that my team has learned and things that we grew from. And then at the end, I put together a example budget spreadsheet and useful product links, especially for new teams to consider across all the different vendors, where to buy things, what to consider, what to not forget that you need to have as a supply for an FRC team. So the difficulties that I found in purchasing, knowing how to turn a design idea into a list of parts to order and remembering all of the different parts and components is very, very frustrating. So when students are putting together a design, they know they want like something that comes down and it rolls in and it takes in a ball, pushes it out somewhere else. But getting from a whiteboard or even a CAD diagram to here's all the parts that we want to order in a single order, consolidate shipping costs is very difficult. So we'll talk through that a little bit. Planning ahead of time, knowing that purchasing needs to happen. Every team is going to purchase at the same time. Things might go out of stock. Having to avoid paying next day shipping, where you might buy a part for $100, but the shipping itself is also $100, seems extremely wasteful. So you want to try to avoid that as much as possible. Also knowing where to purchase parts. So I want to do a review of the vendors that I recommend for first teams, what to do with limited budgets, how to set goals, how to decide what your team's goals are for this year, especially for new teams when you have absolutely nothing. You just given a kit of parts on kickoff day, you don't have tools, you don't have a machine shop, maybe depending on your school setup, and how to grow your program from nothing into an effective program in the first couple years. Also want to talk about wasting money and buying the wrong tools, wrong supplies, and also that rush shipping that I was talking about before. And I want to talk about buying in bulk and versus buying too much, with the note that just cover this now, that unfabricated items, meaning items that you buy from any first vendor that you don't actually touch, you're allowed to use year after year. So sometimes it might make sense to say, you know what, I'm going to buy 50 aluminum rods right now because I know I'm going to use them for the next 10 years. And as long as no one cuts them or drills holes in them, it's totally legal to use them year after year. And a lot of times you'll have like that, you know, that short piece of aluminum rod that was cut but never used from the previous year. Try to use that again next year. So the primary vendors that we use are probably pretty familiar to experienced teams, but I just want to point them out. From my own experience, AndyMark, which also provides the kit of part chassis, provides a lot of the FRC legal motors, electrical components. You can pretty much buy something from AndyMark and be really confident that it's going to be legal and it's going to work with the FRC systems. Vex Pro, I'm a huge fan of. I don't make any money off of Vex, just a disclaimer there. I'm not advertising them or an affiliate or anything, but I really like their systems and their products. And we'll cover that pretty extensively in this presentation. And they have a lot of framing and building materials. They also have legal motors and electrical components and a lot of mechanical components, including bearings, hex shafts, gears, sprockets, chain intake rollers, things like that. McMaster Car is something that a vendor that I wish I knew, especially for the New York City area from day one. We, first couple years, we bought a lot from Home Depot. Everything was very expensive. We were kind of buying nuts and bolts as we needed them. But McMaster Car has really good bulk discounts. And the nice plug for the New York City area is you can, as long as you buy something by 5 p.m. the day of, it arrives by noon the next day, which I thought was amazing. And it's almost like Amazon delivery timeline, which is awesome. And then of course, Amazon, we get a lot of just our random safety equipment, supplies, zip ties, the Anderson power pole connectors that are very popular in First. We bought our machine shop off of there, decided to do off of Amazon because getting it directly from the vendor was, it actually costed more when you accounted shipping, which was free because I ordered it through my Amazon Prime membership. Also consider tax and prepare this ahead of time. Every FRC vendor and really just any company that ships something to you and sends it, you're allowed to submit tax-free documentation. They will apply it to your account so that every time in the entire year and years ahead, when you check out, there's going to be no tax. Personally, we've made the mistake of not doing that in a couple orders, and if you submit, at least in New York City, if you submit with tax, they won't accept your expense report when you're trying to get your money back from your purchases. So work with your school administrators, get your, it's called a New York ST 119. And that's a document where you just list all the vendors you're going to use and the school signs off on it. You email that to Vex and AndyMark, and even Amazon support will set up your Amazon account with, as long as you ship it to your primary school shipping address, then there won't be tax taken out on checkout. And really do that before the season actually starts. It's too much chaos going on in the season. You don't want to be blocked on placing orders because you're like, if I do it now, I'm gonna have to pay $100 in tax. And that really just holds up the entire build season. So I want to talk a little bit about hardware systems that I've had familiarity with since being a part of 7272, and really back in the good old days of me doing FRC in 2007, 2008. I would say back then AndyMark was still a supplier, but the Vex Pro system is a lot nicer and pretty amazing in my opinion. It's really designed specifically for FRC challenges. The diameters of gears and gearbox ratios, uh, the intake rollers and conveyor belt systems are really just designed for the scale of the game. And I think that the amount of different options they have for the gussets and different ways to mount the versaplanetary gearboxes is pretty amazing. And it's also really easy to CAD as well. Like the fact that you can just select in Onshape a cutout or a mounting place on a aluminum tube, select that, and then select the gusset and see it fit perfectly on there, super fast, super easy for students to learn how to use. There's also this MKCAD library that's available within Onshape itself, where all of the parts are already imported. Students have built things like automatically import a Versa tube of 20 inches, you hit enter and it automatically cuts your part to the right size in the program. It's pretty cool. But the problems are that it's also kind of expensive, more relatively expensive than just getting, an aluminum tube that doesn't have all these pre-drilled holes. So you have to balance expensiveness, the fact that random parts will go out of order or just be completely out of stock for the rest of the season, halfway through the season. Some considerations there. So as we're going into our 4th year, for our team, we're going to continue using the Vex Pro system because the students are still learning how to machine more precisely those holes that already exist, make sure that everything's completely square and can be assembled and reassembled pretty accurately. So in the first couple of years, we also used a lot of Andy Mark structure and hardware kits, only because we were buying other parts from there. It was easy to include them in the same order and really just have a lot of extra parts to play around with and prototype. And I think they're good for good new teams and good for prototyping. But there's a lot of limited options and limited, it's not as advanced or all-encompassing as the Vex systems. I also saw a lot of teams at the regionals using 80/20 tube. So that's the tube where it has like these grooves in it and you can slide things up and down and screw them in and they stay really tight together. And it's not a FRC or FIRST specific system. It's used a lot in industrial manufacturing robots. And as a result of it being pretty open source, it's a lot cheaper and you can get a lot more stock for less money. In my opinion, it's harder to CAD. Like I was saying earlier, being able to in Onshape mate 2 parts together by just selecting holes in the Vex CAD files is a lot easier than trying to like precisely align. To be honest, I'm still learning CAD new every day at it. And for 7272, we're really considering 80/20 for building a nice robot cart that has everything organized in it, has like little bins and trays and a charging station. And we also want to build next year an operator console with the joysticks and the computer already like Velcroed to it, so it's easier to carry around. So I'm suggesting here a typical ordering timeline for either some teams or all teams. Beginning with the new school year, every team tries to do some amount of preseason activities. Some teams go insane with really doing an entire build season as a preseason activity, doing elections and figuring out who's going to be on the final team. For 7272, we're really not at that caliber yet. It's only our 4th year. And we're doing things, at least last year's preseason, we did things like in-person bumper making workshops, coding exercises. So think about what supplies you want to buy based on the money that was left over from last year to get students ramped up on what robotics is, how to build parts, how to assemble things, assembling chassis, etc. One thing that I was really proud of is remembering that Black Friday and Cyber Monday exist as holidays, and that we can utilize that time where everything's like 10 to 20% off to save a lot of money on a robotics program. So we bought a new operating console computer last year, and safety glasses, and I think we ended up saving like $300 or $400, or maybe that's a little bit too much, maybe $100 or $200 on just ordering at that time instead of waiting for January. Another thing that we did last year is we talked a lot over our Slack channel about things that we needed, doing our retrospective and look back on the previous season. Like we needed more screwdrivers, we needed more adjustable C-wrenches, and we put all of that together in the Amazon order. And another thing that we did is we actually had carts already set up for ordering after kickoff. So we kind of predicted we need this much VEX parts, we need these gussets. We're probably going to do something at a 60-degree angle, and we definitely need more bearings, and we need more aluminum stock. And we put together carts ahead of time for all of these vendors and went to kickoff, saw the challenge, realized we're probably going to need more intake rollers. We're probably going to need some pneumatics hardware based on the challenge. And we kind of just guessed a little bit. And again, it's a balance of knowing we're at this point, we already know what grants we have for this year, and like our overall spend budget, and what's the right balance of going, making sure that you have enough materials for your students to be able to build things versus ordering too much and wasting money and not being able to roll money over. So we made a call after the first couple of days to do our initial VEX and AndyMark orders. And then we ended up placing a second order about 3 weeks in, realizing that we had a really solid design. It was going a certain direction. We did in-person prototypes based on our on-shape design, and realized, hey, we need more intake rollers, and we need polycord and things like that. So we placed the second order then. About 4 to 5 weeks in, the design changed a little bit. We needed more parts. We broke some things, placed a third order. And then last year's not a good example because of COVID, but we would have placed another order within 1 to 2 weeks of regionals, assuming that there would be enough time to get it, in ordering supplies for our pit space, which we never placed the order because of COVID, as you know. And the thing that I want to point out here is if you group purchasing together into the least amount of orders as possible, the shipping will overall cost less, and shipping things ahead of time and not using rush shipping means that you'll have more money to spend on your robotics program than just shipping things, and chaos results in less money. First choice is an interesting wrench in the whole system. So it's a balance. It's kind of a game, a game within the game. Basically, first choice, as part of your registration, you get X number of credits to spend on very fixed items provided by AndyMark. So you'll get a login, it'll have your points there, and you get to choose from about maybe 100 products, and every year it changes. It's pretty random. And it's all free because you've already paid registration. You get these credits, it's user to lose it. And but it makes things a little bit more complicated, because while you're actually buying things from these vendors with credit cards, you have to choose, like, should I buy it now with credit cards, or should I risk getting it or not getting it with first choice? So basically it's a lottery system. Everybody puts in their order. It runs through an algorithm. People are randomized based on their priorities, and you get what you get in the end. And the first couple years, we totally forgot about the program. So definitely don't do what we did. And we spent all of our credits on like the last round, which is basically like scraping the bottom of the barrel. There's not a lot of like interesting parts. All of the expensive parts were already taken by other teams. And another mistake that we made is that we didn't realize that new parts are added in between each round. So we spent all of our points on the first round or spent them on things that we didn't really need, but we only saw like the 75 products that were there, and we're like, well, let's use them all and see what we can get, without realizing that new parts that we actually wanted instead of the things at the bottom of our list from the last round were going to appear in the second round. So don't make that same mistake. I also want to talk about things to avoid, things that we did early on as well. It's really attractive when there's so much chaos and so many things going on and you're just starting your new program, to buy into these hardware toolkits where you just go to Home Depot and you buy like 3 things. You grab like this toolkit, you grab this power toolkit, and you grab like tons of different like nuts and bolts. And I would recommend not doing that. Spend a little bit more time looking at what you actually need. I tried to zoom in on an image here where it shows the screwdriver bits, and there's like 4 flathead, 4 Phillips, and then you have this whole thing of like random star bits that you're never going to use. And there's like nails in here, and there's like drywall anchors, and all of that's just going to end up in like some drawer in your workspace and never be used. Instead, what I recommend is consult the manuals. You can look at previous year's manuals if you want to buy in advance, or just wait until kickoff day. The EndyMark chassis instruction manual, one of its first pages has buy these types of sockets and a socket wrench and these hex screws. Buy like 5 of those if you're a new team. Buy half of as many members as you have showing up to a build session, just to make sure that you have enough. And really consider buying those instead. And consider the fact that because you have so many students, they all want to get their hands on the robot, especially in early years where the teams are small enough. Like we're still a 25-person team where we let everybody do everything that they want to do, and not only having one drill or one socket wrench really doesn't provide an advantage to all of the students to be able to contribute to the physical construction of the robot. I'd also avoid off-brand power tools. I got a screenshot of just something random I found on Amazon that has a very weird powered battery to it and charger. And I looked at it and was like, I'm definitely never going to be able to find this product or expand it to other power tools in the future. If a power tool isn't very popular, or it's just like being sold that year on a flash sale, that's probably also going to end up in the bottom of a drawer, because when you grow to a much bigger team, you really want like 20 drills, 20 batteries scattered throughout your entire workshop. And everything should be compatible with each other. You shouldn't have to try to find like the right charge battery for the right drill. So instead, invest in name brand power tools. Just spend a little bit of extra money up front, means you're not going to be wasting it in the future. We use Dewalt on our team, and we have 4 batteries, and we have like 4 drills, 2 impact drivers, circular saw, etc. So investing in the right areas is going to have you be saving wasted money over many different years of your program. So this is kind of an example of how the 7272 team in general has evolved over many years. Our rookie year, as everybody's rookie year, it's just we're just trying to get through it and learn from it and hopefully have a robot that drives and does the challenge. So we didn't think too much about a machine shop or anything like that. We just worked with a couple power tools, used the Andy Mark chassis. We weren't invested too much in like a VEX hardware system or anything like that. And we just bought whatever we needed for the first year robot only. The second year, we decided to invest a little bit more in hardware systems based on everything that we saw from other robots at regionals. We decided, let's try out VEX for the second year, and really try to use that system, do proof of concept, try CADing out the robot ahead of time. And we also needed to buy a lot more tools for our expanding team. And we realized that we needed many of the same similar tools in order to spread out building the chassis and using VEX across 5 to 10 students all at the same time. In our third year, we decided to buy a machine shop. So we bought a bench grinder, a table saw, a bandsaw, a drill press, things like that. And we were in an environment where we don't have a wood shop or machine shop in our school. So we bought those resources specifically for the FRC program and put them in our workshop, where we also build the robot in a section that's isolated more for just machining than construction. We also bought more tools. We invested more in stock that we'll use not only for the third year, but the fourth year and fifth year. We also decided to buy a completely separate secondary control system. So we bought a second Robo Rio, PDP, all of the electrical components and extra wire. And that allowed us to, allowed two programming teams to program at the same time, which is more flexibility and trying out their code, etc. But it also allowed programming to still happen while the robot was being built. So we noticed in our first 1 and 2 years, only having a single control system, the programmers were like, I did all my code, but I can't test it. And we're gonna have to wait a couple days because someone had already started deconstructing last year's robot and moving all the components to this year's robot. And it was a little bit frustrating because I don't like to see students just like sitting there and wanting to do more in the program. So we decided to make that extra investment, even though it's really expensive. All of those electrical components are the most expensive part of the robot. We decided to invest so that we could grow our program. And things that we're thinking about for the fourth year or even later is a custom chassis. Maybe not, obviously not this year because of the game replay. Maybe in a year or two, we'll consider that. We also are considering a 3D printer purchase last year, but we decided, nah, let's not do that. But we really want to be able to 3D print VEX parts and do a more advanced prototype before we spend money on the specific gear ratios and making sure that everything, it fits together before we accidentally buy the 42 tooth gear instead of the 40 tooth gear and then realize that our CAD measurements were a couple millimeters off. We also want to invest in a robot cart and operator console going forward. We've always just used like a stock dolly that we move the robot back and forth, and there's always a student carrying the laptop and the joystick back and forth, and it'd be much nicer to have something that you, like all their teams have. And we plan on doing that with 80/20. So the last thing I wanted to do, and maybe I'll look for questions because I think there's a couple questions in the chat first. I put together this spreadsheet. Take a note of the bit.ly URL while I talk through it. The spreadsheet is basically a copy of our previous couple years budgets, and it includes a lot of useful links to where do I find this product, answer some questions, give some suggestions, of like even down to details of like, what are the screws on the top of the Robo Rio and where can I get them? And those things that really takes a lot of research. And I hope that you guys take advantage of the spreadsheet because there's a lot of time that our team has put into understanding where to find things, how much to buy per year. As just an example, every team is a little bit different and doing different things. So let me look at the questions in the chat first, and then we'll take a peruse through the spreadsheet. So yeah, McMaster shipping is so awesome. The ability to, so we changed our design a little bit throughout the season, and we were playing around with using just intake rollers, and then we decided to switch to polycord, and we found that McMaster was the most reliable place polycord is available. And I thought it was going to take a couple days when we first ordered it. It's like, oh man, we're going to be so far behind because a lot of these vendors, it takes 3 or 4 days to get things through. And because we're here, because we're in the New York City area, the factory or the assembly and shipping site is in New Jersey, it just happens so fast. It's pretty amazing and is really helpful. I know we don't have bag day anymore, but and that relieves some stress in the ordering. But even then, like getting it 2 days earlier than you expected is so great. And yes, VersaFrame also very awesome. A lot of teams use it. So let's see. To be honest, the star bits are nice for prototyping because most wood screws, that's true. Most wood screws use them, but other than that, they're useless. Yeah, so the especially if you use deck screws, the star bit is like for constructing 2x4s, etc. But yeah, otherwise you're not going to use them at all unless you specifically choose star bit screws for your entire robot, which I think would probably be insane. So another comment, all a team really needs is nuts and bolts and a toolkit, the pillars upon which FRC engineering stands. That's true, especially for the first couple years when your program isn't super crazy and you don't have all these sponsors and funding from all of your sponsors, and you just have a really small cohort of students. You can really do very basic things. Half of our robot in our first year was from PVC, and we decided PVC because it's easy to cut and it's super cheap. And the first power up challenge, it was a square game piece. So we basically built like this PVC carriage, and the only part that was actually part of the machine, part of AnyMark parts, was this really big sprocket that just turned the whole basket and dumped it into the switch, I think it was called. A 3D printer is one of the best things you can buy for FRC. That's definitely true, especially when you're, like I was saying, considering all of the issues with trying to get parts and realizing that you got the wrong gear or you got the wrong part or it just doesn't fit. You can download the step files from all of these vendors' websites, which they're actually really good at. All the step files are available. You can try out parts before you buy. And without a 3D printer, you could just kind of have to click buy and see what happens. So what type of computer would you recommend? I actually have that in the spreadsheet here. We bought a Lenovo Legion laptop, which is actually a gaming laptop. But when you look at the specs for, we debated about this a lot because a laptop is a really expensive purchase. And I think the laptop ended up being about $1,100, but we also bought it on Black Friday, so we saved a lot of money. And that's our primary laptop for everything. We also have Chromebooks and also a Windows laptop cart with all of the FRC installed on about 15 laptops, and those were both provided by the school. But this one laptop we use for our operating console. We use it to test in our workshop the code. We do most of the current software development is on this laptop. We load our Onshape models when we're working in the workshop. There's a lot of people using this laptop all at once. So it makes a lot of sense, and we're happy with it. And even though we don't go to the regionals to try out the laptop in real time, we think it's like the right purchase decision. So hopefully everybody's had enough time to write down this bit.ly URL while I've been talking. So I'm going to go ahead and open it. And I assume that everybody can still see my screen, even though I exited the presentation. If not, speak up. So I also organized this into priorities that we have been using to address like budget issues, especially in your first couple years. You don't have enough money to really do everything that you want. And there's also a risk that funding and sponsors will be less year after year. So we tried to balance like everything that our school needs to succeed, but also not just spending money to spend money. So in this document, I have a lot of links to VEX parts, including aluminum stock, corner gussets, tons of different types of gussets, Versa block, which definitely, if you're not familiar with VEX, look into it heavily after the session. And they have a lot of different CADs you can download as examples, PDFs, instruction videos. But these Versa blocks are so awesome to really easily assemble a working mechanism. There's links to bumper fabric. I wanted to mention a couple things about bumper fabric. We're still using Andy Mark's bumper fabric, which is, although it's a little bit expensive, it comes pre-cut and specifically designed for you to wrap your entire robot with bumpers, and it's the approved fabric, and they also have vinyl numbers for you. So while expensive, our first couple years, and we're still struggling to get this, but we bought the wrong colors of fabric or the wrong textures, and that it always we always have had issues at regionals with the judges and our bumpers. So we decided last year, let's just buy the official fabric from the vendor, and then eventually we'll have enough time to talk to other teams and see like, where are people getting these reams of fabric from at bulk discounts that is like the exact right color and is of the right strength. Yeah, there's a lot of useful things in here. And we bought most of this just for a single year, knowing, hey, we're going to be doing this program for possibly 10 years, even longer, who knows. But as long as we're still invested in the VEX system and it's trending that way, overspending, even when you're talking about just like a $20 part, is in my opinion, better than underspending, just due to rush shipping and multiple orders. And knowing that that tube you're going to use from the previous year, you're going to be able to use it this year. Even though we bought 2 extra ones, that's okay, it's fine. So this is a link to the computer that we bought for our operator console. We have a lot of tools in here, recommended zip ties, pack of Sharpies. We bought our power pole connectors from Amazon last year, and that worked out. It was actually a little bit cheaper. A lot of links are now going to Andy Mark as well. And this is basically a section, a combination of Andy Mark and Amazon. And then I'm showing off our machine shop basically here. We invested a lot in Wen power tools, which for us seemed like the right balance between price and reliability. Although I do have to say we're having issues with our bandsaw still, so the blade keeps slipping off. We might decide to return it when we can physically do that and buy a different one, or continue troubleshooting it more. We'll see what happens. One thing that I also thought was really funny about last year was how the Falcon 500 motor situation ended up. I was shocked to see that some teams bought like 50 or 60 of these really fancy new motors, which I thought was insane. I thought that 2 was the right amount for our team just to play around with, and we actually didn't end up using them in our final robot because we just didn't feel like the design for a robot met the requirements of it. And here's just some random like additional parts that we went with. We decided to go completely CAN this year. So we bought 2 Talons and we got rid of our V1 Spark Max relays. I guess they're not Max, they're just like the regular tiny Sparks. And we decided, instead of having a dual system between PWM cables and CAN cables, we just decided to go all CAN. The wiring was easier. And our 5th priority was a secondary control system. As I was mentioning, we bought the complete system. Here's the link to everything. Hope it's useful. And even though was the most expensive part of the budget, it's totally worth it, because that situation that I was mentioning happened where the programmers were actually able to continue playing around with sensors, putting together the drive system while the robot was being built. So I see a couple more conversation in the chat. Let's talk about that. And then I think we're pretty much done. I don't know what LRI means. As in LRI, I do not suggest stick-on members and paint them on. Oh, lead robot inspector. Okay, thank you. Yeah, actually, they weren't stick-on. And you're right, maybe we do paint them on in the future. It was actually iron-on, which is technically still stick-on, but we like fully melted on the number instead of instead of a stick-on number. So, and then let's see what else we want to talk about. But yeah, painting on makes sense. Maybe we'll do like try doing a stencil one year where you actually pay it on with spray paint and just call it a day from that. Because we actually found that the heat gun with the melting on aspect was, one, a little bit dangerous because of the risk of being burnt, but also we had to do it multiple times. It was a little bit frustrating because the corners wouldn't completely melt on. So the kids were over there just like melting for a long time. Okay, what else we got? I assume that the next 2 comments are about the Falcon motors. Yeah, we got 2 just because we didn't want to miss out on the opportunities and just be able to try it. I know that there was a lot of chaos about the quality control and orders being delayed. People would like send, I think people actually had to like send some back to get them made. And I think for us, we were lucky enough to be later in the wave to not have to deal with the chaos, but our order was delayed until like February or March, can't remember because it was so long ago. But are we saying that there's still issues, or is this really just the initial launch of it? And based on that, how that goes, does anyone else have any more comments or want to contribute to the conversation at all? If not, I think that's pretty much it.
Okay. So this is Stuy Splash week 2. Thank you for coming, Michael.
Yeah, thanks for hosting.
Yeah, and this whole presentation was recorded and will be posted on our YouTube channel at Stuy Pulse. So if you missed parts of it, you can check it out there.